I've been reading through all of your posts on the social media handbooks. I'm glad so many people found them useful. And I wanted to talk through a little bit more about what some reactions that I had to what you all posted, which I thought was all very good. Um, and also extending a few things. Sorry, come back here. Oh, that's my problem. All right, there we go. Okay, there we go. This wasn't actually a point that you all made, but I'm trying to integrate some points from several different people's things. But it seems to me, and I think you could debate this, but that what a lot of people really react to on social media, what they really crave is authenticity. They really want to see something that looks like something where someone really genuinely, renders something that no one else knows or provides their own experience or whatever you want to say. I'm still trying to conceptualize exactly what I mean by this, but I'm saying that if someone posts something real, something insiderly, something that lets you feel like you know that person, that you are more likely to respond to that. Now, that may be one of several strategies that different brands use or different people use to get you to be more interested in them on social media. But I think it applies to a lot of the points that you guys made. For example, Ashley and Sam and SK picked up on the idea of paid content versus organic content, things that you publish and get shared versus things that you actually purchase through advertising. And again, I think that organic content, if it is done well, if it strikes a nerve, it's going to be more powerful than other kinds of content. And my kid's soccer practice is rained out. That's what that thing was for. But also, a lot of you all, like Allie and Molly and Kendall Wilson and Patricia, brought up the notion of knowing your competition. And I think, again, that sort of fits in this broader point of understanding what your brand is and what the world is like that you're living in, the community that you're trying to attract, and recognizing, of course, that there may very well be other brands that are trying to reach the same audience, and so knowing those sorts of things. And Jordan and Nicole Tarnowski made a similar point. I just love the idea of not advertising burgers on a vegan hashtag or things like that to make that point. Another issue is kind of how much do you flood the zone with material. This gets back into why you don't do a lot of play-by-play over Twitter, because it's just not an effective way of doing stuff and you're just clogging up people's timelines and things like that. But what is important is to maintain some level of continuity. Kendall Wilson again referred to planning and sort of being able to plan out a campaign. And I wish Jen had been willing to reveal a little bit more about that last week. But also recognizing that there are storylines playing out on social media and understanding how you fit into those storylines. Metrics is obviously key to all of this. And a lot of you all picked up specifically on the question of timing and how important that is. Also, I noticed Glenda and Patricia both talked about, I think it was Patricia, whoever is a Facebook fanatic, but both talked about the specific analytic tools you can get to. And so that's a great way of seeing whether people are actually paying attention to what you are posting beyond the small circle of friends and people who engage you visibly. But there is another couple of tools that can be put to your disposal. With Hootsuite, part of the reason that I had you guys do this exercise with Hootsuite is both to learn what they think is most important or most useful in creating social media. And of course, a lot of that exam had to do with using their tool specifically, and I don't care if you use their tool or not. But again, it's more about what people find to be the most important things that you ought to be doing on social media and how you use this particular tool to execute them. So anyway, all that by way of saying that it does have some tools, like it will figure out the best time to post content based on your followers' activity. I'm not sure it's 100% effective, but it's an interesting tool, and I'm sure it's a whole lot better if you pay lots of money for it, which I have not yet done. There's some other interesting questions, like Connor Burks mentioned Starbucks and the power of brands that use social media. But he made a point about something like about Starbucks being able to use 10 million, or to have 10 million followers, and therefore being able to reach all 10 million of them. Well, that may or may not be the case. Because it all depends on who happens to see a particular tweet at a particular time. And a lot of this is timing and just pure dumb luck. I mean, I know it had one tweet this morning that didn't really go viral, but it got noticed by a lot of people whose opinion I care a lot about. And that comes down to dumb luck. I mean, it was sometime in the morning. I didn't put that much thought into when I should post it, but I did, and it got picked up by a couple of folks. And so that was really gratifying to see. But then the question is, a lot of people will pay a lot of attention to metrics. You have to pay a lot of money to get the really good metrics to give you the best advice on this stuff. So the Athletic Association, for example, Jen mentioned this in passing, but something she and I have talked about before, that they will probably invest in a consulting firm that generates these customized reports that will tell you exactly how your tweets and other forms of social media are performing, what's most effective, and provide advice that way. And the university is thinking about something else. Hootsuite will do a little bit of this for you, and as we said before, the platforms themselves will provide a little bit of information. But the bigger question here, and SK kind of raised this, is the notion of strategy effectiveness. And many of y'all mentioned as well, just sort of going back and looking to see how well a particular campaign or strategy executed. And many of you, of course, will be doing this specifically here in the next couple of weeks for the campaign assignment. But the other step is really interesting, which is that if you're a brand, you're looking for people to buy your stuff. So can you link social media metrics to actual money, to return on investment? I talked about this summer with some folks at Coca-Cola who work on their social media, and the short answer is no, you can't. What you can do, though, is link it to engagement with your brand and sentiment about your brand, and those end up being most important. So that's something really important to keep in mind. And then another sort of integrative idea I thought a lot of y'all brought up was sort of fell in this overall realm of intentional consumption versus passive consumption. And what I mean by that is if you're sitting back and kind of scrolling through Twitter or Instagram or Facebook and sitting back, that's a form of passive consumption of just reading it the way you would watch TV or read a newspaper. Not that any of us read newspapers anymore. But then the question is, how do you get people to intentionally consume your content, to go looking for it? Because when they do that, they're going to be much more likely to engage with it, much more likely to interact with it and to share it with their followers, and therefore it's the most important content in terms of using social media strategically. And the key thing about that, or the key way I think that most of you all got into in terms of engaging that, is using hashtags. And lots of people will use hashtags just sort of as conversational pieces or whatever. But when you think about the way the hashtag can create a community of people who are using it, it gets really interesting. So the one perfect example of this, for the sake of this class, is hashtag #SMSports on Twitter. Lots of incredibly useful content and people talking about sport and social media in a way that's really useful, and that's why I want you guys following that particular hashtag. There are challenges. CJ kind of alluded to this, the challenges of getting interactivity and knowing when you engage with someone. Again, when I was at Coke this summer, they talked about the fact that they actually don't engage all that much with their consumers because they're scared if they give someone a platform that they haven't necessarily vetted and that person turns out to be a racist or a supremacist of one sort or another or a whack job, then it may seem like they're lending a little bit of their credibility as a brand to that person. They want to avoid that at all costs. So I think it's interesting to see how different brands strike that particular balance. And is it that they only engage with people who have a certain number of followers, or only engage with people that they know or have some pre-existing relationship with, or they engage in anybody? And you see that all over the map, whether you're talking about personal accounts or corporate accounts or things that people use professionally. I thought there were some interesting things. People talked a little bit. Oh, let me mention this here really quickly. I would encourage you to go back and look at Twitter and just search and see who's using UGA versus Bama versus UGA as hashtags. That seems like a really trivial point, but the thing is, if you're searching for one, you're not going to see the other. So, and if you look actually right now, I just did this before I started shooting this video, and if you look at UGA versus Bama, it is mostly people who are fans or casual observers, and if you look at Bama versus UGA, It's a combination of those folks and also ESPN, the SEC network, and other official labels. That's because, and some of you all will remember this from intro sports, typically you put the visiting team first and the home team last in scores, and so that convention has kind of been adapted for hashtags like this. Now, of course, they do it differently in soccer, but I'm just not even going to go there with this. But anyway, I would encourage you to look at, follow, and use Bama versus UGA just because there's probably going to be more traffic, and probably people who are more tuned into Twitter are more likely to use that rather than UGA versus Bama. So it was fun looking at the people talking about the distinctions among platforms. I thought Elizabeth captured this kind of neatly in thinking that Twitter is a place to go for news, Facebook for social, and Instagram for fun. Of course, they're blending a good bit, and especially Facebook is really trying to make a strong play to become a news platform because you can add more information there. So I think that is probably the distinction, or that you guys use it to keep up a little bit with friends and family and don't really take it seriously. But I think old people, and probably more of you all in the future, not just as you become old, but in general, are going to start looking for more news that way. And of course, a lot of people picked up on the power of visuals. Nicole Castrellon and CJ both mentioned this, and the whole notion of Pixar didn't happen. But pictures just grab you more. That's why we use them. Pictures can tell a story more quickly, more effectively, and a lot of times. And then finally, we talk a little bit about calls to action. And Tony Barnhart talked about this a lot a couple weeks ago now in terms of steering people to the websites that he's writing for, and that's what he sees as the purpose of social media, which is kind of limited. But I thought Jordan picked up the notion of using social media to give life to old content or to create some staying power to it. And that's really, I think, going to be important when you have something valuable that can be shared again and again and people are going to find useful. Your personal experiments so far have been kind of fun. It's interesting because a lot of you all use this within your own communities, and you can see your communities engaging with this, whether it is your sororities or your friend groups or other things like that. And I think that's where we all sort of start thinking differently about social media, and we start thinking about using it in a professional context, which is not to say that any of you have posted anything inappropriate that I've seen. But the one thing I will say is looking at Ashley's picture of the setup for Coach Rick's lunch and the whole Media Tuesday thing that they do down there is probably the most likely to get attention from a wider group of people because it's showing an inside look at something. And I think that insiderly content, like I said before, that authentic, organic content is what's going to be most powerful for a lot of folks. So I'm pretty much going to wrap it up there, but I am going to offer a little bonus, just basically to see who is paying attention or stayed with us so far. So what I'd like you to do is, if you've gotten this and you would like a point of extra credit, is go find a hashtag that really does work to build a community, that a community rallies around. And explain it, write up a little story about it, and put it in the story_conversation channel on Slack. And, SM Sports is a perfect example, so you can't use it, but just explain what platform it's on. First of all, are we talking about Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter? Second of all, who you see using it most often. And then third is what people are using it for. What information are they exchanging? What are they doing with it? What do they hope to accomplish? So go out and find another hashtag like that and see what you make of it, and we will go from there. So remember, tonight, 9:30, I will be doing a Google Hangout. It's mostly to test Google Hangouts with Professor Johnson, but it will address some of the things we talked about last week. And I will see you either virtually or in person on Thursday, and I'll have more information about that after tonight, after we get the chance to test out Google Hangouts to make sure that I know that it works. So enjoy the rest of your weekend. Stay dry.